Hi, Michelle Glass here. Welcome to our first episode of our Chapter 6, Lecture 6 series. And our topic for this presentation is, and the whole chapter is energy for life, or, how do cells actually take that glucose molecule and use it to create energy in the form of ATP. So, of course, we've already seen that our ecosystem is solar powered. So we've talked before about sunlight giving plants the energy they need to actually produce the glucose. So it's the job of our producers to turn solar energy into biochemical energy. That carbohydrate, that glucose molecule, can then be used at the mitochondria to make more ATP. So we are seeing that cells are taking glucose and turning that into an ATP molecule, which then can be the energy necessary to fuel the cell. We've also seen with every single transfer of energy from one form to another, so in this case from sunlight to glucose, from glucose to ATP, some of that energy is going to be lost in the form of heat. So this is a nice overview of what we see happening at the cellular level. Now we're going to be talking about a process that's going to be referred to as respiration. Respiration is just talking about exchange of gases. So in this case, we're exchanging, of course, carbon dioxide gas and oxygen gas. So we will see both plant and animal cells need oxygen gas and give off carbon dioxide gas as waste products as a result of a process called cellular respiration. Cellular respiration would be, of course, gas exchange at the cellular level. We can also talk about this process as aerobic respiration because when we're talking about the exchange of gases, oxygen is a requirement. As we're looking at these processes described here in Chapter 6, essentially what's happening is we start with our glucose molecule and we're going to pull electrons off of glucose. When we pull off those electrons, we need to have a molecule to absorb or accept those electrons, and we'll see that in aerobic respiration, that molecule is oxygen. As we pull these electrons off glucose and transfer them to oxygen, a big bunch of energy is released. This can be enough energy to, create a whole combustion. So when you are lighting wood, or if you are lighting a sugar cube, or, lighting a lipid, you're going to have enough energy release that you're going to have both heat and light given off. Clearly, that's not okay to happen inside of a cell. So what we'll see is there'll be a very controlled steps of movement of this electron so that energy is released as it goes from glucose to oxygen, but it's not a big boom combustion of energy. Instead, it's going to be these manageable amounts that the cell can harness. These reactions that are talking about this transfer of electrons are referred to as oxidation reduction reactions, or you can talk about them as redox reactions, where you're combining the first parts of both oxidation and reduction into this single word. Oxidation is the loss of the electron, so you can use the memory device LEO, where LEO stands for loss of electron is oxidation. And then the opposite of this is reduction, which is the gain of the electron. So you can remember GR. So gain of electron is reduction. Okay, so I've kind of written my descriptions here opposite of my memory devices. You see that? All right. So redox reactions then is a combination of LEO, GR. So LEO is loss of electrons is oxidation, and GR, gain of electrons, is reduction. Now, when we're looking at our overall chemical equation for aerobic respiration, we are starting with our glucose molecule that is highlighted there as C6H12O6. And we see that it combines with oxygen molecules, 6 oxygen molecules, because this is aerobic, which means oxygen is required. And our products for this reaction are 6 carbon dioxide gas molecules, 6 water molecules, ATP for the cell to use for energy. And of course, we've transferred energy from one form to another. And so we also get some heat being given off as well. When we look at our reaction, we see that this is an example of a redox reaction. So some of our molecules are losing electrons and some of our molecules are gaining electrons. If you kind of follow where the hydrogen goes, it will help you know whether it's gained or lost electrons. So if we look at our sugar molecule, our glucose, C6H12O6, it's highlighted there. It's going to be oxidized. Those hydrogens are going to be removed. So we're losing electrons. It's oxidized to just carbon and oxygen, so carbon dioxide gas. You see that? Okay, so see if you can figure out what part of our reaction is the reduction. Where do you see a molecule that's then going to be gaining hydrogen? And when we gain hydrogen, we're gaining electrons. Can you find that? Okay, so your oxygen molecule is reduced. It's gaining hydrogen, gaining electrons. So our aerobic respiration equation is a redox reaction. You have glucose being oxidized, losing electrons, becoming carbon dioxide gas. And at the same time, you have oxygen being reduced, gaining hydrogen, gaining electrons, forming water. So we saw previously, let's pop open this picture again, that when we are looking at our aerobic respiration, we're basically pulling electrons off glucose, so we're oxidizing glucose, and we're going to be reducing oxygen. We're going to be pairing those electrons to oxygen and producing water. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that transfer of electrons. You know, we will see throughout our processes, there's going to be several different steps. And we're going to see this molecule here, NAD+, important in our oxidation reductions of aerobic respiration. We'll see it at lots of different levels of our process. NAD+ is a coenzyme. Coenzymes are basically derived from our vitamins. So that would be the significance of vitamins in our diet. NAD+ is going to be reduced to NADH. So it's accepting electrons, but it's not that final electron acceptor. Remember, the final electron acceptor is going to be the oxygen at the very end of that transfer of electrons. So it's going to temporarily hold on to it. You can think about NADH as acting like a taxi or an Uber. It's going to be important in holding on to that hydrogen and then transporting that to what's going to be described as the electron transport chain. So the role of the NAD+ is to be reduced to NADH, so it can then transport that hydrogen to the electron transport chain, where we then get to transport our electrons and release energy to use to make our ATP molecule. So here we're going to see embedded inside the mitochondrial inner membrane, we have what's described as the electron transport chain. We will see some important proteins here, some of which are, derived from vitamins also in our diet. We see our little NADH molecule transporting our electrons to the electron transport chain. You can also refer to this as the electron transport system. So you might see that in some of your materials or hear me refer to it as the ETS or electron transport system. So basically what's going to happen is that NADH is going to release those electrons, and we're going to move the electrons from one protein to the next. And with each one of those movements, we're going to get small amounts of energy being released. Now remember, if we just went straight from NADH directly to oxygen, we could have like a big, huge combustion of energy. So we don't want that, right? We don't want to have a big combustion inside of our cell. And so we will see instead these small stepwise releases of energy that the cell can harvest. Oxygen, remember, is our final electron acceptor. So it's going to grab hold of those electrons. It's going to pair up with hydrogen ions so that you end up with hydrogen and oxygen, which is our water molecule. So our oxygen is not just grabbing those electrons, but also the protons from the hydrogen in order to make our water. Basically, our goal of our electron transport chain is to harness the little bursts of energy that are released as you're moving the electrons from one proton to the next, and you're using that energy that's released in order to move hydrogen ion. So we'll pick up on that here in just a minute. Okay, that's it for now.